My husband's mistress walked into my workplace with her baby bump, smiling like she had already won. She thought she was about to destroy me in front of everyone. She had no idea my husband had already signed away everything he owned. Before she walked back out those doors, both of their lives would change forever. My name is Maren Holloway, and until a few months before that day, I believed I had a happy life. I was the operations director at my family's logistics company in Chicago. I loved my job because I had worked hard for every promotion. My coworkers respected me, and I treated everyone with kindness. I had been married to Brenner Cade for 9 years. In the beginning, we were a strong team. We dreamed about building a good future together. We bought a beautiful home, traveled whenever we could, and believed we would grow old side by side. But little by little, everything started changing. Brenner began coming home late almost every night. He always had a different excuse. Sometimes he blamed traffic. Other times he said he had business dinners or last-minute meetings. At first, I believed him because I trusted my husband. Then I noticed something else. He became secretive with his phone. If I walked into the room, he quickly turned the screen away. He started making private phone calls outside the house. He also became strangely interested in our company finances, even though he had never cared much about them before. Money also started disappearing faster than usual. Large amounts were leaving our accounts, but whenever I asked about them, Brenner smiled and said he was making smart investments for our future. He always sounded confident, so I tried to ignore the uneasy feeling in my heart. Still, something didn't feel right. Every night I lay awake wondering why the man I loved seemed like a stranger. I kept asking myself if I had done something wrong. I wanted to believe our marriage was just going through a difficult season. I hoped that if we talked honestly, we could fix everything. I had no idea that my life was already heading toward the biggest betrayal I had ever experienced. And I never imagined that the woman carrying my husband's child would soon walk through the front doors of my workplace, believing she had come to ruin me, when in reality, she was walking straight into the end of both their plans. A few days after everything started bothering me, I stayed late at the office to finish reviewing some shipping contracts. Before leaving, I realized Brenner had left one of his leather folders in the conference room after stopping by earlier that afternoon. I picked it up, planning to take it home for him. As I opened it to check if there was anything important inside, a folded receipt slipped onto the table. It was from a small hotel outside the city. 2 names were printed on it. One was Brenner's. The other was Celine Ashcroft. I froze. I had never heard that name before. I wanted to believe there had to be some simple explanation, but the uneasy feeling in my stomach kept growing. That night, after Brenner fell asleep, I searched through our financial records instead of asking him questions. The hotel payment was not the only strange expense. There were expensive dinners, weekend trips, jewelry purchases, and apartment rent, all paid from accounts that should never have been used for personal spending. Every new record made the picture clearer. The next morning, I called an attorney instead of confronting Brenner. I knew that if I accused him too early, he would only hide more evidence. I needed facts, not excuses. The attorney listened carefully and suggested bringing in a forensic accountant to examine every financial transaction connected to our company and our shared accounts. Within 2 weeks, they found far more than I expected. Brenner had been moving company money through fake vendor payments. He created invoices for services that never existed and signed approval forms using my electronic authorization without my knowledge. At first glance, everything looked legitimate, but the accountant found small mistakes that connected every transaction back to him. The amount of money shocked me. This was no longer just about an affair. He had been risking the business my family had spent decades building. He believed I trusted him enough that I would never look closely at the records. I left the meeting with copies of every document safely locked in my briefcase. My hands were shaking, but my mind was clear. The man I married had lied to me for years. He had stolen from the company, betrayed my trust, and built another life behind my back. From that moment on, I stopped looking for reasons to save my marriage. I started preparing for the day the truth would finally catch up with him. After learning the truth, I changed the way I acted around Brenner. I stopped asking where he had been. I stopped questioning the missing money. When he came home late, I simply said goodnight and went to bed. He looked surprised at first, but after a while, he seemed relieved. He believed I had given up. That was exactly what I wanted him to think. Every morning, I went to work as if nothing had happened. I smiled during meetings, handled company business, and stayed focused. Behind closed doors, however, I spent hours with my attorney and the forensic accountant. We organized every document in order, making sure every payment, signature, and transfer could be explained with clear evidence. I also met with the company's board chairman. He had known my parents for years and cared deeply about the future of the business. I showed him only the facts. I didn't speak with anger or tears. I let the documents tell the story. The board quietly started its own review without Brenner knowing. His access to certain financial records was monitored, but nothing changed on the surface. We wanted him to feel comfortable. People make bigger mistakes when they believe no one is watching. At home, Brenner became more confident every day. He laughed more than he had in months. He started talking about expensive plans for the future, acting as though nothing could stop him. Sometimes I caught him smiling at messages on his phone while sitting across from me at the dinner table. He mistook my silence for weakness. He had no idea that every choice he made was adding another piece to the case against him. My attorney also helped me protect everything that legally belonged to me. We separated important financial interests and secured records that could not be changed or destroyed later. Every step was done quietly and within the law. The hardest part was pretending that everything was normal. Some nights I wanted to tell him I knew everything. I wanted to ask why he had thrown away our marriage and risked the company. But I stayed silent because I understood something important. If I acted too soon, he would hide evidence. If I stayed patient, he would keep exposing himself. So I waited. Brenner believed he was in complete control. He thought he was fooling everyone around him. He never imagined that the confidence growing inside him was leading him straight toward the moment when he would lose far more than he had ever expected. About 3 weeks later, my attorney told me everything was ready. The last step depended on Brenner's signature. If he signed the documents without asking questions, the plan could move forward exactly as we had prepared. Getting him to sign turned out to be easier than I expected. One evening, after dinner, I placed a neat stack of papers on the kitchen table. I told him the attorneys had recommended updating some company records because of new business requirements. I kept my voice calm and made it sound like another routine task that needed both our signatures. Brenner barely looked at the first page. He flipped through the papers quickly, signed where I pointed, and pushed them back toward me. He did not ask for copies. He did not call his own lawyer. He trusted that I would never do anything without telling him. The moment he walked away from the table, I carefully placed every signed document back into the folder. Early the next morning, my attorney filed everything exactly as planned. Over the next several days, each document became legally effective. His authority over several important company accounts ended. His ability to approve large financial transactions disappeared. New controls were added to protect the business from any further damage. Everything was done according to company rules and legal advice. Nothing changed on the outside. Brenner still walked into the office each morning believing he had the same power he always had. He greeted people with confidence and continued making plans as if he owned his future. He never noticed that decisions now required approvals he no longer controlled. At the same time, my divorce moved quietly through the legal process. There were no loud arguments, no scenes outside the courthouse, and no attempts to embarrass him. I wanted everything handled with dignity. The court reviewed the agreement, the financial evidence, and all the required documents. When the judge signed the final order, my attorney called me with the news. My marriage was officially over. I sat alone in my office for several minutes, staring out the window. I expected to feel anger or even relief, but instead I felt calm. The hardest decision had already been made long before that day. I folded the final court papers and locked them inside my desk. Brenner still believed he was living the life he had planned with Celine. He had no idea that the future he was counting on no longer existed. The truth was already waiting for him. He just hadn't walked into it yet. The moment I had been expecting finally arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning. Our office was busy as usual. Phones were ringing, employees were moving between departments, and a client meeting had just ended. I was reviewing reports in my office when I heard raised voices near the reception area. One of my assistants knocked on my door. "There's a woman here asking for you," she said carefully. "She refuses to leave." I already knew who it was before I stepped outside. Celine Ashcroft stood in the middle of the lobby wearing a tight dress that showed her pregnancy. She rested one hand on her baby bump and looked around with a smile that seemed almost proud. She wanted everyone to notice her. The entire floor had gone quiet. People stopped typing. Conversations ended in the middle of sentences. Every pair of eyes turned toward us. The receptionist asked if she should call security, but Celine spoke before anyone could move. "I'm carrying Brenner Cade's baby," she announced loudly. I thought his wife deserved to hear it in front of everyone. A few employees exchanged shocked looks. Others stared at me, waiting to see what I would do. Some looked embarrassed just to be standing there. Celine took another step forward. "He loves me," she said. He's building a future with me now. You should stop pretending your marriage still exists. Her words echoed through the lobby. I looked at her for a few seconds without saying anything. Then I noticed Brenner walking through the front entrance. He froze the second he realized what was happening. His face turned pale. He looked from Celine to me, clearly realizing she had come without telling him. Celine smiled when she saw him. I did it, she said proudly. Now everyone knows. For a moment, nobody spoke. The silence made the room feel even heavier. I took a slow breath and turned to the receptionist. Please close the conference room, I said calmly. And make sure no one comes in until we're finished. Several employees looked confused by how calm I sounded. I picked up a folder from my office desk and held it in my hand. Then I looked at Brenner and Celine. If you're both here, I said, we might as well finish this together. Neither of them understood what I meant. They followed me down the hallway, believing they were about to watch me fall apart. Instead, they were walking into a room where every lie they had built together was about to collapse. The conference room door closed behind us, shutting out the whispers from the hallway. Brenner looked nervous for the first time in months. Celine stood beside him with her arms crossed, still wearing the same confident smile. I placed the folder on the table and opened it. I think it's time both of you knew the truth, I said. I slid the first document across the table toward Brenner. He glanced at the first page, then looked again more carefully. His eyes moved quickly from one line to the next. The color slowly disappeared from his face. This can't be right, he whispered. It is, I replied. The divorce became final several days ago. He looked up at me in complete disbelief. You divorced me? I followed the law. Everything has already been approved. Before he could say another word, I placed another group of papers in front of him. These are the financial findings, I said. Every unauthorized payment, every false invoice, every forged approval has been documented. His hands started shaking as he turned the pages. Celine stepped closer and looked over his shoulder. She frowned, unable to understand why he suddenly looked so frightened. Then Brenner's phone buzzed. He ignored it. A second notification appeared. Then another. Within seconds, the phone would not stop vibrating. He finally picked it up. His expression changed with every message he read. His company email had been disabled. His access card had been cancelled. His executive accounts were closed. His authority to approve company transactions had been removed. Every system he depended on was locking him out. This has to be a mistake, he said, reaching for his phone again. It isn't, I answered quietly. The board voted after reviewing the evidence. He tried calling someone from the executive office, but the call went unanswered. Celine looked at him, confused. You said this company was yours, she said softly. Brenner didn't answer. You promised we'd be moving into the new house next month. Still, he said nothing. She stared at the documents covering the table. For the first time since she walked into the building, her confidence disappeared. The future she believed was waiting for her no longer existed. She hadn't taken the place of a successful wife. She had attached herself to a man who had lost his marriage, his position, and the life he had promised her. Neither of them spoke. The room was silent except for the sound of Brenner's phone, still buzzing with new notifications that confirmed there was nothing left for him to hold on to anymore. The conference room door closed behind us, shutting out the whispers from the hallway. Brenner looked nervous for the first time in months. Celine stood beside him with her arms crossed, still wearing the same confident smile. I placed the folder on the table and opened it. I think it's time both of you knew the truth, I said. I slid the first document across the table toward Brenner. He glanced at the first page, then looked again more carefully. His eyes moved quickly from one line to the next. The color slowly disappeared from his face. This can't be right, he whispered. It is, I replied. The divorce became final several days ago. He looked up at me in complete disbelief. You divorced me? I followed the law. Everything has already been approved. Before he could say another word, I placed another group of papers in front of him. These are the financial findings, I said. Every unauthorized payment, every false invoice, every forged approval has been documented. His hands started shaking as he turned the pages. Celine stepped closer and looked over his shoulder. She frowned, unable to understand why he suddenly looked so frightened. Then Brenner's phone buzzed. He ignored it. A second notification appeared. Then another. Within seconds, the phone would not stop vibrating. He finally picked it up. His expression changed with every message he read. His company email had been disabled. His access card had been cancelled. His executive accounts were closed. His authority to approve company transactions had been removed. Every system he depended on was locking him out. This has to be a mistake, he said, reaching for his phone again. It isn't, I answered quietly. The board voted after reviewing the evidence. He tried calling someone from the executive office, but the call went unanswered. Celine looked at him, confused. You said this company was yours, she said softly. Brenner didn't answer. You promised we'd be moving into the new house next month. Still, he said nothing. She stared at the documents covering the table. For the first time since she walked into the building, her confidence disappeared. The future she believed was waiting for her no longer existed. She hadn't taken the place of a successful wife. She had attached herself to a man who had lost his marriage, his position, and the life he had promised her. Neither of them spoke. The room was silent except for the sound of Brenner's phone, still buzzing with new notifications that confirmed there was nothing left for him to hold on to anymore. News traveled faster than I expected. Within a few days, everyone close to us knew that Brenner was no longer part of the company. They also learned that the board had taken legal action because of the financial problems uncovered during the investigation. People who had only heard rumors before finally understood why everything had happened. Several coworkers stopped by my office, not to ask questions, but to apologize. Some admitted they had believed I was simply trying to push Brenner out of the business. Others confessed they thought I had overreacted after learning about the affair. Now they knew there had been much more going on behind the scenes. I thanked them and told them to leave the past where it belonged. I had no interest in proving anyone wrong anymore. A few relatives reached out as well. Some had avoided me for weeks because Brenner had told them I wanted to destroy his career out of anger. After seeing the facts for themselves, they realized they had judged me without knowing the full story. One evening, Brenner's older cousin came to my office. He looked embarrassed. I should have listened to you, he said quietly. I believed everything Brenner told us. I simply nodded. There was nothing left to argue about. Meanwhile, Celine was dealing with a different reality. She had started asking Brenner questions he could no longer answer. She wanted to know why he had hidden the company's financial problems. She wanted to know why he claimed the divorce had been finished long before it actually was. She also discovered that many of the plans he had promised were based on money he never truly had. Each answer led to another lie. The more she uncovered, the less she trusted him. Their conversations became louder and more frequent. More than once, she left before they finished talking. Brenner kept trying to convince her that everything would work out, but his words had lost their power. Promises mean very little when trust is gone. People who once admired Brenner now kept their distance. Friends stopped calling. Business contacts no longer returned his messages. He had spent years building his reputation, but it disappeared much faster than he expected. As for me, life slowly became peaceful again. For the first time in a long while, I walked into work without feeling anxious. I no longer wondered what secret I would discover next. The truth was finally out, and I no longer had to carry it alone. The choices everyone made became clear. Not because I asked them to choose, but because the truth eventually made the decision for them. Several months passed, and life looked completely different. The legal process continued, and Brenner had to spend most of his time meeting with attorneys instead of running a business. The savings he once depended on disappeared quickly as bills and legal costs kept growing. One by one, the things he had taken for granted were gone. He moved out of the large house he had wanted to keep and into a small apartment across town. Every choice he had made finally came with a price. Celine stayed with him for a while, hoping things would improve. She kept believing he would find another high-paying position or somehow rebuild everything he had lost. But each week brought another disappointment. The job offers never came. People in the industry had already heard what happened. Companies were careful about hiring someone connected to financial misconduct. Brenner blamed bad luck, unfair treatment, and everyone except himself. After hearing the same excuses over and over, Celine stopped believing them. One afternoon she packed her things and left. She realized she had trusted promises instead of truth. The future she imagined had never been real. It was built on stories Brenner told to impress her, not on the life he actually had. When I heard they had separated, I didn't celebrate. Their relationship was never my concern anymore. My attention stayed on the company. With the support of the board and our employees, we slowly repaired the damage. New clients signed long-term contracts, and old partners returned after seeing the business was stable again. We improved our systems, hired experienced managers, and made sure every financial decision was carefully reviewed. The company became stronger than it had been before. Something inside me changed as well. For a long time, I believed winning meant watching Brenner lose everything. I thought revenge would make me feel whole again. I was wrong. The real victory came the day I stopped thinking about him every morning. I slept peacefully again. I laughed with friends without pretending. I made plans for the future without wondering what secret waited around the corner. My confidence returned little by little. I realized that peace is something nobody can give you, and nobody can take away once you choose it. Looking back, I understood that revenge was never about destroying the people who hurt me. It was about refusing to let their betrayal destroy me. That became the greatest success I could ever have asked for, and it was worth far more than anything Brenner had lost. Looking back now, I no longer think about what was lost. I think about what was found. There was a time when betrayal felt like the end of everything. It seemed impossible to imagine a future without the life that had been carefully planned for years. Every memory felt heavy, and every new day brought another reminder of broken trust. But life has a strange way of moving forward, even when it feels impossible. Some wounds do not disappear overnight. They heal slowly, one small step at a time. The anger becomes quieter. The sadness loses its grip. Eventually, the past stops controlling every thought. The company recovered because good people refused to let one person's choices destroy what so many had worked to build. New opportunities came, stronger partnerships were formed, and every success became proof that honesty still mattered. The biggest change, however, wasn't in the business. It was in the mirror. The person who once questioned every decision became someone who trusted her own judgment again. She stopped waiting for apologies that would never come. She stopped wondering why someone else chose betrayal. Those answers no longer mattered. Brenner and Celine made their own decisions, and they lived with the results of those decisions. That chapter belonged to them now, not to her. Life became peaceful in ways that money could never buy. Mornings no longer started with worry. Evenings no longer ended with unanswered questions. Home became a place of comfort instead of uncertainty. Sometimes friends asked if revenge had been satisfying. The answer was simple. Real peace never came from watching someone else fall. It came from standing back up. The strongest victory was never proving anyone wrong. It was creating a future that no longer depended on the people who caused the pain. Some people believe the loudest person wins. That isn't always true. Sometimes the strongest person is the one who stays patient, protects what matters, and keeps moving forward without letting bitterness decide the future. In the end, they believed they had taken everything that mattered. They didn't. They only walked away from a life they were never worthy of keeping, while a better future was quietly being built without them.